Good morning. My name is Eric Lee, and I was born here. But no, I wasn't born there. This was where I was born. Shanghai at the height of the Cultural Revolution. My grandmother tells me that she heard the sound of gunfire along with my first cries. When I was growing up, I was told a story that explained all I ever needed to know about humanity. It went like this. All human societies develop in linear progression, beginning with primitive society, then slave society, feudalism, capitalism, socialism, and finally, guess where we end up? Communism. Sooner or later, all of humanity, regardless of culture, language, nationality, will arrive at this final stage of political and social development. The entire world's peoples be unified in this paradise on earth and live happily ever after. But before we get there, we're engaged in a struggle between good and evil, the good of socialism against the evil of capitalism, and the good shall triumph. That, of course, was the meta-narrative distilled from the theories of Karl Marx, and the Chinese bought it. We were taught that grand story day in and day out. It became part of us, and we believed in it. The story was a bestseller. About 1/3 of the entire world's population lived under that meta-narrative. Then the world changed overnight. As for me, disillusioned by the failed religion of my youth, I went to America and became a Berkeley hippie. Now, as I was coming of age, something else happened. As if one big story wasn't enough, I was told another one. This one was just as grand. It also claims that all human societies develop in linear progression towards a singular end. This one went as follows. All societies, regardless of culture, be it Christian, Muslim, Confucian, must progress from traditional societies in which groups are the basic units to modern societies in which atomized individuals are the sovereign units. And all these individuals are by definition rational. And they all want one thing, the vote. Because they're all rational, once given the vote, they produce good government and live happily ever after. Paradise on earth again. Sooner or later, electoral democracy will be the only political system for all countries and all peoples, with a free market to make them all rich. But before we get there, we're engaged in a struggle between good and evil. The good belongs to those who are democracies and are charged with the mission of spreading it around the globe, sometimes by force, against the evil of those who do not hold elections.
A new world order, ending tyranny in our world.
A single standard for all who would hold power.
Now, this story also became a bestseller. According to the Freedom House, the number of democracies went from 45 in 1970 to 115 in 2010. In the last 20 years, Western elites tirelessly trotted around the globe selling this prospectus. Multiple parties fight for political power and everyone voting on them as the only path to salvation to the long-suffering developing world. Those who buy the prospectus are destined for success. Those who do not are doomed to fail. But this time, the Chinese didn't buy it. Fool me once. The rest is history. In just 30 years, China went from one of the poorest agricultural countries in the world to its second largest economy. 650 million people were lifted out of poverty. 80% of the entire world's poverty alleviation during that period happened in China. In other words, all the new and old democracies put together amounted to a mere fraction of what a single one-party state did without voting. See, I grew up on this stuff, food stamps. Meat was rationed to a few hundred grams per person per month at one point. Needless to say, I ate all my grandmother's portions. So I asked myself, what's wrong with this picture? Here I am in my hometown, my business growing leaps and bounds. Entrepreneurs are starting companies every day. Middle class is expanding and in speed and scale unprecedented in human history. Yet, according to the grand story, none of this should be happening. So I went and did the only thing I could. I studied it. Yes, China is a one-party state run by the Chinese Communist Party, the party, and they don't hold elections. 3 assumptions are made by the dominant political theories of our time. Such a system is operationally rigid, politically closed, and morally illegitimate. Well, the assumptions are wrong. The opposites are true. Adaptability, meritocracy, and legitimacy are the 3 defining characteristics of China's one-party system. And most political scientists will tell us that a one-party system is inherently incapable of self-correction. It won't last long because it cannot adapt. But here are the facts. In 64 years of running the largest countries in the world, the range of the party's policies has been wider than any other country in recent memory. From radical land collectivization to the Great Leap Forward, then privatization of farmland, then the Cultural Revolution, then Deng Xiaoping's market reform. Then successor Jiang Zemin took the giant political step of opening up party membership to private business people, something unimaginable during Mao's rule. So the party self-corrects in rather dramatic fashions. Institutionally, new rules get enacted to correct previous dysfunctions. For example, term limits. Political leaders used to retain their positions for life, and they used that to accumulate power and perpetuate their rules. Mao was the father of modern China, yet his prolonged rule led to disastrous mistakes. So the party instituted term limits with mandatory retirement age of 68 to 70. One thing we often hear is political reforms have lagged far behind economic reforms, and China is in dire need of political reform. But this claim is a rhetorical trap hidden behind a political bias. See, some have decided a priori what kind of changes they want to see, and only such changes can be called political reform. The truth is, political reforms have never stopped. Compared with 30 years ago, 20 years ago, even 10 years ago. Every aspect of Chinese society, how the country is governed, from the most local level to the high center, are unrecognizable today. Now, such changes are simply not possible without political reforms of the most fundamental kind. I will venture to suggest the party is the world's leading expert in political reform. The second assumption is that in a one-party state, power gets concentrated in the hands of the few, and bad governance and corruption follow. Indeed, corruption is a big problem, but let's first look at the larger context. Now, this may be counterintuitive to you. The party happens to be one of the most meritocratic political institutions in the world today. China's highest ruling body, the Politburo, has 25 members. In the most recent one, only 5 of them came from background of privilege, so-called princelings. The other 20, including the president and the premier, came from entirely ordinary backgrounds. In the larger central committee of 300 or more, the percentage of those who were born into power and wealth was even smaller. The vast majority of senior Chinese leaders worked and competed their way to the top. Compare that with the ruling elites in both developed and developing countries, I think you'll find the party being near the top in upward mobility. In a system run by the body, a powerful institution that functions like a giant human resource engine that we can be of these successful corporations. It brings taking care of free components, civil service, state enterprises, and social organizations like a university or a community program. They form separate.
We have other people joining us on Zoom. So let me just open the thing up first. you. Okay, let's get a start.
Sorry, there's one thing I want to say. Last week we had a Zoom class. I attended the class, but I could hear other people, but you couldn't hear me. Maybe I was a couple of minutes late, and maybe you had to let me in or something. I was trying to speak, but no one heard me. I couldn't hear everyone else. The point I was trying to make was that you said that humans have achieved so much because we can. I'm not exactly sure about the word that you used, but I think you used the word conceptualize, right? But I think fairly recently they carried out experiments with chimpanzees, and they found that chimpanzees in that control experiment were able to conceptualize as well.
I don't, probably you're right, because the idea I get it is from the book Sapiens by Harari. That's, yeah. So the whole idea that we can have a common belief among ourselves that helps to organize ourselves. But for that, it is very difficult to prove or otherwise whether other animals will have a common belief. They can conceptualize. I think that's true. But whether that conceptualization is spread among all the chimpanzees in the group, I think that will need some thinking in order to prove. We don't know. But that is proposed by Harari, that yes, that's one of our strengths. We can have a common belief, like money, nations, countries. These are concepts. But I think that is an interesting idea to introduce, and then we can, anybody interested can investigate. Okay, today what we want to do is look at the domestication of animal. Now, because we know that domestication of animals occurs before we domesticated plants by quite some time. The first domesticated animal is actually the wolf, which become our dog. Hello. Yes, we just started, so that's okay. So what is domestication? It's a sustained multi-general mutualistic relationship in which one organism assumes a significant degree of influence over the reproduction and care of another organization in order to secure a more predictable supply of a resource of interest, and through which the partner organism gains advantage over the individuals that remain outside of this relationship, and thereby benefiting and often increasing the fitness of both domesticator and the target domesticate. So this is a mutual relationship. The mutual relationship involves the domesticator, human, for example, which control over the reproduction of the domesticate, the dog. We control its reproduction in the sense that we allow or don't allow a certain type of animals to mate to produce. We can block their reproductive pathway, so it's different. And then in that process, we might select for the characteristics which we prefer. For example, we want a dog to be tame. If the dog is very aggressive, we probably kill it and eat it before it has the chance to reproduce. And therefore, in that sense, we control the reproduction. And then that control obviously allows us to have a constant supply of dogs. We allow this kind of dog to reproduce, and therefore we will have the next generation of dogs and so forth. Another interesting thing is multi-generation. So it is not just within one generation. Within one generation, we can tame an animal by, for example, positive behavior reinforcement. If we do something you want, you give it a food as a award, then that behavior can increase. But that is only within a generation. You are not extending beyond that particular generation. That's called taming. It's not domestication. Domestication is a multi-generation. This generation, you select those animals which fit your purpose to allow these animals to reproduce. So the next generation will have some characteristic of their parents, more likely to be more closer to your expectation. And that among that generation, you also do a purposeful selection. I'm still looking for that characteristics. So only among the next generation, those animals which meet your expectation will get the chance of reproduction. And then the rest is eliminated for somehow. So that is a multi-generation. Now, this definition recognizes both the biological and cultural components of the domestication process and the effects on both humans and the domesticated animals and plants. This is a general definition, so we include plants here, but today we are looking only at the animals. Of course, the change in terms of biological, we just explained, you have to modify the genetics of the next generation by selection. But this is not natural selection anymore. It is a human-controlled selection. So you are forcing the animal to evolve in a certain direction that we assume it will benefit us. But at the same time, a domesticated animal also changes our own culture. For example, when we domesticated cows, we now have available the cow milk, which we can use to feed our children as well as ourselves. So culturally, we started to drink milk beyond the original mother's milk. Now we have other types of milk. And then for that onwards, we know that we can use milk to produce cheese, to use milk to produce butter, etc. So on that sense, it had a feedback effect on the way we live as well. For some, yes?
I read a fascinating statement some years ago. You know, many people suffer from lactose intolerance.
Yep.
Is it true that some races don't actually have lactose intolerance because they domesticated the cow earlier than others?
Yeah, some cultures will have milk drink for a long time, so they will have the lactose tolerance, but some don't. So I think that probably is one of the reasons, because the evolution is two ways. When you have access to milk and you find that that milk doesn't fit you, for example, after drinking it, you got diarrhea, etc., then you will stop drinking it. But those who drink it, able to drink it, probably will gain an advantage in terms of strength, in terms of growth, in terms of more appeal to the other sex. And therefore you got, yes, that might be. I think, for example, Chinese doesn't drink milk for a long time. To us, milk is not available. Our buffalo is more used to helping in the field rather than drinking its milk. I don't know whether India or any place, do you drink a lot of milk?
India, Sri Lanka, they drink buffalo milk as well, but cow milk, yes, when we're growing up.
Yeah, when we're growing up, okay. Yeah. To us Chinese, we drink the soy milk more than.
But I know going on from what I said before, I think it's the Germans. Am I right? The Germans are the ones who or that area, Germanic areas, that they domesticated the cow first, and maybe they have less lactose intolerance.
Yeah, we will have this domestication time a little bit later on. I can't remember exactly, but cow is pretty early. We domesticated for a couple of thousand years already. So we probably will have that lactose tolerance. And then again, different culture, different respect to different animals. Now so we talk about this cultural component as well. And then all past definitions of domestication have included a relationship between humans with plants and animals, but their difference lie in who considered the leading partner in the relationship. This new definition recognizes a mutualistic relationship in which both partners gain benefits. It's quite obvious, human domesticated animals, it must be benefit to humans. But whether it benefit to that animal, then we have to look at from the evolution point of view. Those domesticated animals actually can reproduce much better than their wild counterparts. Look at the amount of chicken we have. We actually helping that particular species to reproduce by a lot. So from that sense, yes, we are also benefiting the other animals. Because from the evolution point of view, survival is the most important thing. You get reproduced and then you get growing in numbers. But of course, from other aspects, what do you mean by gain in the relationship? Maybe they got a very easy life until being slaughtered. Domestication has vastly enhanced the reproductive output of the crops, livestock, pets beyond their original program. Domesticate us. I forgot one thing for the Zoom people. I haven't shared the screen for them. Sorry. Let me share screen. Sorry. They were hearing what I'm talking about, but they didn't see anything. So where's the screen? This one. Sorry for those online. I forgot to share screen. It won't happen next time. This is the first time. Let me continue with this one. Okay, go back here. So domesticate also provide humans with resources they could more predictably and securely control, move, and redistribute, which has advantage that fuel a population explosion of, so benefit both sides. Actually, this domestication is beyond human. So I'll give you 2 examples. Leaf cutter ants and certain fungi. Leaf cutter ants will take some leaves and take it back into its hive and then use that to grow a certain fungi. And that fungi is able to produce something for the ants' young to drink or eat. This species occur mostly in that part, in the red part in the Central America near the southern border of the United States. After human, leaf cutter ants form the largest and most complex animal societies on Earth. How they define that, I don't know. But in terms of number of ants participating, they may have a lot of numbers because they're so small, but they have a large colony. Their society is based on an ant fungus. And different species of ants use different species of fungus. But all of the fungi the ants use are members of a certain family. The ants actively cultivate their fungus, feeding it with freshly cut plants and material and keeping it free from pests and moths. So you need to work to keep the fungi. And the fungi cultivated by the adults is used to feed the ants' larvae, and the adult ants feed on the leaves sap. The fungus needs the ant to stay alive, and the larva needs the fungus to stay alive. So it is a mutualism, is a obligatory. They both depends on each other. Actually, the plant also depends on them as well. Sanitization. All surfaces must be sanitized. Oh, sorry, not this page. Press the wrong button, sorry. This page. The fungi used by the higher ants no longer produce spores. These ants fully domesticated their fungi partner. So that's one example. The other example is, okay, how that fungi also affect the ants, because you have waste, and therefore you need ants to remove all the waste. So the waste transporters and the waste heap workers are the older, more dispensable leaf cutter ants. So also by the ants growing old, then they are doing the dirty job. Okay.
Albert, in terms of the ants and their brains, in terms of their mass, is it a high proportion?
I don't know. I don't study ants. I'm just giving you an example. Maybe there's another interesting area we can invest.
Because I'll tell you why. Because ants, just ants, in artificial intelligence, there's a technique called ant colonization technique.
Yeah.
And you know this method that they use, how they go gather food, and things like that, quite sophisticated.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if their brains are very large compared to their body size.
Maybe distributed intelligence. Just distributed intelligence, just like swarm.
Yeah, swarm.
Swarms. In a swarm, we don't need a lot of intelligence in individual members, but collectively, the swarms can behave like intelligence. So maybe ants is also type of distributed intelligence in a sense. It depends on, I think their communication method is by chemicals, by smell. So I think the link between different nodes, as in a swarm computation, will be rather short and slow. But of course, today we have large swarm of, say, drones, coordinate flights. And obviously we can't program individual drones so they will have some kind of distance, etc. I think ants probably work in that way as well. Okay, let's see.
On this episode of Stories from Nature, we explore the mystery of how ants farm and milk aphids. Never in 1,000 years would you expect
I think I need to move the sound out, so let me just stop it for the time being. There's a lot of things I'm learning to control at the moment. So sound, not this one, sound, TV. Okay, try again.
Turn the odds of survival in their favor. Every spring, usually when weather is cool and wet, aphids, the bane of every gardener, show up on plants like kale, Swiss chard, and Brussels sprouts. They find the juiciest specimen they can find, build a colony, and go to town sucking the juice from the plant. Luckily, this colony aspect ends up with a few of the gardener's plants being wasted and not the whole crop. If the plant becomes overpopulated with aphids, like you can see here, they'll develop and grow wings and fly over to a new plant and start a new colony. But the ants have a different idea. These clever little characters are able to lift up to 5,000 times their own body weight, have a different special ability, not their super strength, which is used in the domination of the aphids. Never would you expect such a bizarre and devious thing going on in your garden, but ants use chemicals on their feet to tranquilize and subdue aphids, which allows them to harvest them for food. New research shows the chemicals in ants' footprints will not only tranquilize but inhibit the ability for aphids to regrow their wings. Now, we already knew that ants use the chemicals on their feet to mark their territory, but ants will also mark leaves or a stalk of a plant. And as the aphids land on it, they will become tranquilized, to which the ant will march over and clip their wings, preventing their escape. The aphids, almost acting zombie-like, get to work sucking juice from the kale, filling their body with honeydew. This honeydew is then excreted by the aphid when the ant strokes the back of the aphid, to which the drop will appear. Quite frankly, this looks like it's coming out of the butt of the aphid. Nature is weird. After reviewing the footage closely, the ants will either drink the sap directly or collect it on their front appendages and later drink it off their arms. The honeydew aphids produce will become the primary source of food for the ants, with the odd whole aphid thrown in there as a meal to mix it up. It's possible the aphids are allowing this or are okay with being under the ant spell, as the ants will fight ladybugs that try to eat the aphids. Ants will move them around to the best plants to provide the most amount of honeydew and will move them to shelter when it rains, potentially into their own nests. This honeydew is liquid gold for the ants. On closer inspection, it appears the ants battle each other briefly for dominance of who gets first dibs of the dew, with the other ants relying on the scraps. The ants spend all day going from one aphid to the next, drinking up the dew or tending to their army of aphids. Aphids are born pregnant, so when a new baby pops out, the ant will get them into place so their new worker can start drinking and they can milk their dew. Daily rounds of clipping wings are done and the cycle starts all over. Have you heard of something in nature as bizarre as this? Share your thoughts in the comments down below. Hope you enjoyed this video. Why not check out another video on the channel, and until the next one, have a good one.
So this is the second example. Very interesting, isn't it? And another interesting is called this domestication syndrome. It's described the change of a certain phenotypic traits arising during domestication. So maybe it's better to use example to explain. Okay, here it explains the difference between taming and domestication. Domestication is multi-generation and is affecting the genes. Taming only affects the current generation of that particular animal. It doesn't provide a next generation effects.
Cats, if they're allowed to go into the wild, will become feral. They change dramatically and no longer have predisposition to humans, as is you get horses and you release them, even cattle up north, and they become feral.
Yeah.
And they have no predisposition towards humans at all. So it can happen through the generation.
Yeah.
So the
reversal is very quick. Yes, I think so. Especially when they mix with the wild counterparts to reproduce. Only one or two generations, it will completely go wild. I mean, the other thing is if they are following their domesticated effects, they can't survive in the wild, because they lost some abilities when they are domesticated.
But doesn't this bring up the larger question of how long does it take to change the character traits? They keep saying that we get low back problems even today because at one time we were on all fours.
Yeah, good question.
So how many millions years have we now been on to bipedalism, but we're still getting.
Yeah. So, the Soviets actually have done an experiment on fox. So that will be at the end of this one. So we will talk about how many generations. But I think, again, there is also another interesting observation is from China. When China becomes the communist China, everybody has to behave the same. So they try to eliminate the ethnic minorities characteristics. But after opening, so from about 1949 to about late 70s, all people in China have the same salary, looks the same, dress the same, behave the same, etc., okay? But 1970s, when they open up, that external pressure is released, the government no longer care. You know what? All these small ethnic groups sprung back to their original style of living. Today, if you go to China into those Western regions, then you will see a lot of different minorities actually dressed in their minority costumes and living their own ways. It sprung back just like boom. When the external pressure is off, boom. I think that also happens to domestication. You will let it go without the human pressure on it, then you will very quickly return to, because if you don't return to your normal wild state, you can't survive, because you need that wild ability to hunt, to cooperate with other animals, etc. So I think there is a survival pressure as well. So they will swing back very quickly. Human domestication actually providing a protection to the animals, to the domesticate. So once that protection is gone, they have to go back to life like the wild. And if they can't survive.
Herbivores can do that much easier going back to the wild. Carnivores not so, because the training in catching of prey, except for feral cats, which
feral cats keep their abilities instincts quite well.
Yeah, they do very well.
Yeah, they keep that instinct.
Bigger cat.
Yeah.
And that depends on the amount of game readily available.
Yeah.
But you see, you're talking about, well, you know, are you talking about domestication coming through the genetics? And I would dispute that, maybe. It's more conceptualizing of who you are, or what you are as a being.
But we noticed that, for example, the chickens available to us today has very large piece of spread meat, the breast meat. It is not natural yeah. And then these chickens can't fly anymore because too heavy. Whereas in the wild, they will have to at least reduce their body weight in order to survive, in order to catch food, etc. So I think, yeah, that there is a little bit of genetic, but there is a lot of also about their survivability in the wild. Because, so for example, some of the conservative persons, organizations, when they rescue some animals, they have to train it back to learn to live in the wild before they release it. I think that is exactly be aware of their survivability when they're in wild without human protection. So you need to train them back in order to be able to survive in the wild. Okay, that is already talked about. Okay, when does it happen? Now this is horizontally is aged in kilo years ago. Okay, so here is 5,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, and around 12,000 years ago, there is a cold period. And then we are coming out from the cold into a warmer period. We are actually in the warm period as well. And of course, about 7,000 years ago, there was a cold event. Somewhere here is 8,200 years ago. There is a cold event. But before that, we are coming out from the cold. So it is around that time we see that most domestication started. I think there is also a survival problem for humans. Humans need to be able to survive by changing its way of life. The environment changed because of the weather pattern change. So weather pattern change is a global event, whereas locally, the climate change might change a lot of local features. Food sources might change, the kind of animals available may change, the kind of plants available may change, and that what humans need to adopt. And that's during that period, we notice a lot of domestication happening. Okay, the first one is, of course, human and dogs.
Hi guys, Stefan Milo here. Today we're going to talk about something very interesting. Today I'm not Stefan, this is a clear spoon. Clearly the real Stefan would use a white one. I am a friend of Stefan's though, and you guys apparently are in good hands because he trusted me to talk to you guys today about the domestication of the dog. My name is David Ian Howe. I'm an anthropologist. You may know me from Instagram, and I don't mean to plug myself. My Instagram is called Ethnosynology, so it's instagram.com/ethnosynology, just plug myself. Anyway, ethnosynology is the study of dogs in human cultural contexts. Vis-a-vis, it is dog anthropology. And that's what I study, and I'm going to talk to you guys today about that. So the first theory is going to be the self-domestication hypothesis or the flight distance hypothesis. These hypotheses kind of revolve around the idea that wolves with inherently more docile genes were less fearful of humans. It could stand to be around them. When I say flight distance, it's not necessarily about flying, it's about fight or flight, or as Gandalf would put it, Raymond and Lorna Coppinger, who are zoologists that coined this theory, believe that wolves with a lesser flight distance were able to stand humans longer. They could stay around their camps longer. Wolves with a greater flight distance just hauled ass quick, or they were so aggressive that they just didn't want to be near humans. It's the ones that could stand to be around them longer that probably passed on these docile genes. So perhaps generations of wolves did this, right? They just, more docile genes get passed on and passed on and passed on, but it probably started with the outcasts. These outcasts can't cooperatively hunt with other wolves immediately, so they have to find food somewhere, and they go and hang around human camps. Over time, these wolves with a lesser flight distance will become proto-dogs, or essentially an early dog. Does that sound familiar? I think so. That's what dogs like to do. Let's move on to the second natural selection theory, and this is the symbiotic mutualism hypothesis. This is the idea that wolves and humans are more or less equals in the animal kingdom. There's obviously way more differences between them, but there are a lot of similarities. This is in the sense that wolves and humans live in the same environments and they hunt similar prey. Another thing that makes us kind of equal is complex social groups. Humans and wolves have a similar way of socializing. They have a hierarchy in a sense, they have communication between each other, and they use their social skills to cooperatively hunt and achieve goals. Yeah, I wrote a similar video for on this subject with Ted Ed. You can check that video out too. The animations are pretty sweet. It's based on Keith Haring, the pop artist. Pretty cool. So think about this further. This would mean that humans and wolves are likely competing with each other a lot, coming into close contact. If you ever hunted, you should probably hunt something and kill it kind of with one shot, or a very humane shot that kills it quickly. In the past, though, we didn't have high-powered rifles, and we had stone tools, wood tools, and bone tools. Sometimes it didn't work out. If you didn't kill the animal immediately, you had to track its blood trail. You followed the blood trail, and you find the bleeding animal, only to find out that there's also wolves eating the carcass. They beat you to it. So that probably happened. I can't say for sure, but let's imagine something like that happened. In another sense, wolves might have killed something, and humans saw it. They probably heard it happening, and we might have stolen the kill. We would kill the aggressive wolves, and the ones that were less aggressive, that didn't want to bother us, we probably threw them a bone. Or we didn't. They just lived to fight another day. Now, the wolves that we didn't kill, or that could stand to be around us longer, in the same sense as the flight distance hypothesis, may have learned, oh, I don't really need to do all this hunting stuff. I don't need to spend that many calories. I can just go hang out with these humans and eat their food. Now, there's this weird trope for some reason in movies and literature that says that Aboriginal humans ate everything of the animal, and they could, from the snout to the tail, and they ate everything. Well, there wouldn't be archaeology if they did that, because you can't just chew down on bones. Yeah, you can crush them into powders and you can eat the marrow out of them and stuff, but you're going to throw that out sometimes. There's parts of the animal that you just don't eat. Why? Because you don't really need to. There's better cuts of meat, and you have abundant meat sometimes, so you don't need to eat the whole thing. You're going to throw this in your bin heap outside, or a trash pile, or maybe a latrine, you throw it in there. But either way, it's going to start to stink. Wolves and other predators are going to smell that, and they're going to realize, oh, I can profit. There's indigenous groups in the Americas that were documented to have worn wolf pelts and obviously studied the way wolves hunted, and they tried to mimic that and put the wolf pelts on and would sneak up on bison and have them interact the way they would with wolves. I can't read, so I'm going to have my friend Carlton do this. You guys know him. Carlton, take it away.
While the herd of buffaloes are together, they seem to have little dread of the wolf and allow them to come in close company with them. The Indian then has taken advantage of this fact and often places himself under the skin of the animal and crawls for half a mile or more on his hands and knees until he approaches within a few rods of the unsuspecting group and easily shoots down the fastest of the throng.
We can probably guarantee that in the past something similar happened. And other archaeologists have suggested that when humans got to Eurasia and it's a new environment, you got to figure out what you got to do. While you do have large game in Africa, like impalas and buffalo, but when you get to Europe and Asia, there's different animals there. You're gonna have to figure out a tactic to get them efficiently without getting killed. We probably studied how wolves did this. Now, let's move on to artificial selection theories. Artificial selection is selecting for certain traits in an animal to reach a desired outcome. This is called controlled evolution. Another artificial selection theory posed by Germonprez et al., I think, well, put it there, is the idea that maybe humans were trapping wolves for their furs, or keeping them captive. There's a lot of sites around the world where wolf bones have cut marks on them from human stone tools. They could have been eating them, they could have been getting furs at different times, but in the beginning, maybe they were just wanted the furs. Wolf fur, unlike bison fur, is like a lot more mendable. You can use it to fill little gaps in your clothing. So if you think about it, humans could have been tying wolves up to a tree. I don't know how they would have done it. Maybe they clubbed them over the head or whatever. Maybe even corralled them. But then when it's a really cold winter and you can't go out and hunt, or there's nothing left to hunt, you have these captive wolves that you can just go kill. You have meat, and you also have their furs. You know you won't freeze to death. It's a really interesting theory. The pet wolf or Pinocchio hypothesis. This is the idea that ancient peoples adopted wild wolf pups. And they would obviously select for certain traits like less aggression and more docile genes. They probably wanted wolf pups to protect camp or something or help them hunt later on. The problem with this, though, is if anyone's ever trained wolves or worked with trained wolves before, you have to constantly train them. You can't just pull a wolf out of a den and expect it to be wolf. Actually, if you're pulling wolves out of your den, that's your first problem. There's a lot of skeletal remains around Eurasia, people missing fingers and hands. Maybe that's why. I don't want to suggest that's exactly how it was, but it's a possibility. You can't just take a wolf pup out of a den and expect it to be a domestic dog. It doesn't work like that. It's a wild animal still.
Yeah, it had its flaws, but I liked it. If you haven't seen it, it's basically Walmart brand The Revenant with a dog.
Personally, I don't think this hypothesis is correct in the beginning. Later on, as the wolves began to scavenge, I think maybe people were doing this more often. Probably not the first thing they did, though. For me, and knowing how intelligent humans were back then, I wouldn't stick my hands in a wolf den first thing in the morning. Oh, that's all well and good. We have natural and artificial selection theories for dogs, but how long did that take? When did dogs come about? To answer this, we need to talk about this. Привет. I have a strong suspicion of who this is going to be, but let's just double check. Who are you? Меня зовут Дмитрий Баяев. I serve a geneticist, serve a cytologist, serve a zoologist. I make famous domestic fox experiment. Да? Oh, hey. Can I get some of that? Спасибо. На здоровье. На здоровье. I need to talk to you today about Siberian fox experiment, no? Long story short, I serve a geneticist. I like Darwin views. I like Mendelian views. Soviet government don't like those views. I go to Siberia, I make Siberian fox experiment. I put foxes in cage and I make breeding scenario. What I do when I breed foxes is I take a nice glove, a nice safe glove, stick inside fox cage. If fox bite the glove, fox is mean, fox is aggressive, I call dragon. Huh? Then if I stick the glove hand inside fox cage and fox cower away from hand, or fox lick hand, or fox do anything other than be mean to hand, fox good fox. And in just 13 generations, I make domestic fox. How I know fox domestic? Well, fox start to bark, fox have spotty coats, fox tail start to wag, and fox have happy disposition, foxes are more docile, foxes like people. Other foxes, dragon foxes, still hate people the whole time. No, we don't like those foxes. Well, they're still good foxes. I mean, they're good at doing what foxes do. Well, I make domestic fox. What more do you know? Science Magazine 2010 said Dmitry Bayayev makes one of the most important advancements in genetics in history. Glad I could help, David. I like your Instagram. It's great Instagram. That's good. You're funny. Okay, I go now. До свидания. Got it.
Okay. So we know the fox has been domesticated in 13 generations, done by the Soviet at that time in the 1940s, 50s, around that time. Positive selection So we are directly selecting several the characteristics that we like. And interestingly, when we select it, there are other traits which we didn't expect and occurs. For example, the coat color, their brain size reduced, the behavior becomes much younger, keep that teenagers much longer than expected. 40 years, there's another typical example. And then actually their endocrine system and reproduction cycles also changes according to the humans. So there's a lot of modified behavior which is beyond the original idea of domestication. Yeah.
So fascinating that the brain size has reduced.
Yeah.
I would have thought that dealing with humans, the brain size might increase.
I think so, but they found that their brain size actually decreased. Probably because we give them too much protection.
Not working hard enough.
Not working hard enough, yeah. Probably.
Not competition.
When we think of domesticating animals, what comes to our minds first are dogs and cats, and maybe even rabbits and parrots for some. But in Russia's Novorossiysk, foxes are man's new furry friends. Here's our report.
Wagging his tail and dancing around his parents, Blombeer should not be confused as a dog. He is actually a fox. Blombeer is a part of a decades-long scientific experiment. The study to observe how wild animals are domesticated. The pet fox is happily led around.
Okay, we learned that already. What I'm trying to show you is this domesticated fox behave very similar to domesticated wolf, which is dogs. So that is an interesting side effect. Okay, here is only, I collect this part only for the sake of completeness, because actually we are running off our time anyway. So just that, what I'm trying to show is what kind of animal, and then in there I will tell you when, from what, in where. The first part. Okay, so dogs is probably 13,000 of before current era. So that is about 15,000 years ago. And then it is domesticated probably first in China and Europe. So there are two origins. And then from the current extinct population of gray wolf. So that is the information that, so I'm just collecting it together. And then the second part is what are the purpose we domesticated this particular animal. For pets, today dogs are usually pets, except some working dogs in the farm, etc. But mostly as pet for hunting, for herding, guarding, pest control. I don't know what kind of pest dog can help us to control. Is that cats or rats? I don't think dogs catch rats. I don't know. That part I don't know. Draft, park, working, show, racing, sport. For meat, yes, there's. Don't get terrified. There are a lot of Asian cultures which still eat meat. Now, not only China, okay? Korean, Japanese, etc. also eat dog meat. So there are some Asian cultures still eat meat today. Eat dogs as meat. And then for rescuing, guiding, fighting, service, etc. So there is the second line is therapy. The dogs provide therapy service. I have a dog which also provide therapy service to some disabled people. So my dog works 2 times a week. He typically works on Wednesday and Sunday. Because he is sent to a disabled person to keep her company. Goats, about 10,000 years ago or 12,000 years ago. Pigs, about 11,000 years ago. Sheep, about 11,000 years ago. And cattle, about 10,000 years ago, etc., etc. So these are only just a list of all these animals, which I would think chicken will be longer, but actually chicken is only about 8,000 years ago. Guinea pig. Now, guinea pig is originally for meat in the southern Africa, America. But today, a lot of them is used as pets. Donkey, ducks, and this is buffalo. Camel is 6,000 years ago. Horses. So we have camels before horses. Silkworms. This is 5,000 years ago, and the Chinese already domesticated these silkworms to produce silk. Pigeons, goose, is that yak? Yak. Llama. Alpaca. Okay, I'm interested in the latest. Okay, so turkey is only 180 years ago. Oh, that new. Goldfish, about 300 years ago. Rabbit, cow in Japan, and canary, fancy mouse. So they have been domesticated for a long time as pets. Of course, today used as research to try different medicine, etc. Another fish, mink, foxes, 1950s. I mean, that is almost the latest. Yeah, come in. Okay, from UVA, we need to wear masks, but when I'm talking, I can take it off because I'm quite far away from you. And we have to scan the QR code and sit a bit further apart. Of course, a family is exception. Huh? Yeah. That's another class. So, yeah. Okay, bye. Yes.
Next week I'll be visiting my daughter, so I'll be away. Is it possible to do Zoom? Can I do the Zoom class next week?
Yes, you are welcome to do so.
Oh, great.
Yeah, and that I actually have sent out the invitation to your email.
Oh, okay.
So check it out, and then, yeah, anytime if you like to join, if you don't want to come here, you can join me on Zoom. No problem. Okay, anytime. So it's as long as it's convenient, okay.
Very convenient. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we serve page sanitizations. So when you leave, take something, sanitize the area, and then you can leave so that the next one can come in. Make sure that they don't have virus. But at the moment, I think we are quite safe. Victoria doesn't have much of the virus spreading in our community, so we should be quite safe. So car parking, don't park in this area. Coffee, at the moment, there's only hot water units. Unlike in the this where you can have coffee and milk Not at the moment. I think eventually they might provide again when the virus is gone. Okay, so that's for today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, I'll prepare for the next one. This one, close.